What's up, guys? Welcome to the Creative Collective podcast. Well, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Creative Collective podcast. Today, I am joined with a newer friend of mine, but I've been following him for quite some time. His name is Alan. Alan, what's up, man?
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm
Good.
loving it. It's a little rainy here in Charlotte, Queen
Yeah.
City, but it is a
Hey.
good day, and I'm off today, so I'm really happy.
Hey, that's what's up, man. Will you kind of just give, for the people that are listening or watching, maybe, will you just kind of give them a little bit of who you are, what you
Yeah.
do, what you're currently doing, and whatnot?
Yeah. So, thank you for having me. First of all, I'm the founder and executive director over at Concept Factory Incorporated. We are a creative nonprofit that helps advance underrepresented visual storytellers, and so we do community groups to really just bridge that gap to get creatives together and sharing resources. We do city meetups, we do workshops, hosted by industry professionals, things of that sort. And then our grand vision is to have creative co-working spaces, what we call our collaboration hubs. And those are going to be in different cities, starting in Atlanta, which is where the organization was birthed out of. And from there, going to other cities and cities where creatives need to be represented. And then also, I work at Elevation Church as the e-groups director at our Concord campus. And so Concord is a suburb of the Charlotte metro area. And I partner with a lot of the e-group leaders up there, and we just help people get connected to community. So community all around.
That's awesome. That's so good, man. So yeah, when I first, I think I was introduced to you by a couple of mutual friends, Cap, and
Yeah.
then as well Ryan Adams from URev, and I started following you. And dude, like the moment that like I started following you, I just started looking. You know, you go through the deep dive of somebody's social, just to like, oh,
Yeah.
what's this person about? You start going to the company, and then you go to their personal page, and dude, like specifically even with your Concept Factory page, I really like. I had a heart just to like try to get to know you. Like it was like this thing. Like I want to get to know that guy. I want to get to know that guy because one, dude, I really believe that we're gonna talk a lot about collaboration and what that looks like
Yeah.
within different elements and different life spectrums and whatnot. But I really want to talk to today. But what I really loved about you specifically is that you have this gift and ability to bring people together, especially with creative meetups. So when Nomolos first started, we launched creative meetups like out of the gate. Like that was the first thing that I wanted to do. I was like, I just want to meet other freelancers, other people. Like I want to join together because one, I believe that the creative field can be one that is very isolated
Yes.
in different moments, and which there's a time and a season for not necessarily isolation, but when you need to be alone to do some work. But I would love to kind of open up the conversation because I think that you have a really good heart of bringing people together. When did you first come to the realization that you had this passion for one, for what is birthed out of the Concept Factory,
Yeah.
and then two, when did you first realize, man, like I love bringing people together?
Yeah, I think if I'll actually answer the second question first. So I really first started realizing it, and God is so amazing because He took me through a lot of seasons in life where I did not have community and I did not have friends that I could call on, and I spent a lot of years as like a quote unquote loner. And so from there, it really birthed in me a desire for community because I understood what it was like to not have community. And from there, God will always take you. You got me preaching already. God will
Come
always
on.
take you through feeling what it's like. He'll always take you through the problem, so that way you can experience the problem, and
Come
then
on.
he'll give you the giftings to solve the problem. So that way, when you're solving the problem, you will now have an empathy toward the people who are also in that problem. And so from there, like I always tell people, God is a God of empathy, not just sympathy. He will sympathize with
Wow.
us, but because the Bible says he sympathizes with us, but he also the Bible says Jesus was tempted in every way that we were. So he knows what it's like to be human. He stood in our human
Yeah.
flesh, just like us. And so with that, he took me through seasons of not having community. And I really just felt the pain that comes with that. And it's a lonely journey. And so from there, when I got to college is really where I started noticing like, God, I think you gifted me in this because, and I say this humbly, but God would use me a lot to just bring people together, and he would give me different ideas. And even my own friend group in college, it was like a matter of like, I met this person and then introduced them to that person, introduced them to that person. Then people were just coming together and they were forming great friendships. And it was like, God was always showing me that I was kind of at like the nucleus of all of that. And I was like, huh,
Wow.
like God, I think you're showing me something here. And then just different people would come to me and be like, hey, Alan, like, you're really like great with connecting people, or we all met through Alan, or whatever it may be. So God really will start revealing the gifts that he's put inside of you. And then as for Concept Factory, I had always had like an inkling toward filmmaking and toward creativity, but I had always seen of like, well, I can't have a career in that. Like, that's like a hobby. That's not a career. That's not going to put food on the table or pay rent in this day and age. But from there in high school, I started really getting into a film class. And then in college, I studied communications and journalism, really had my hands on the camera a lot and behind the scenes. And from there, I fell in love with producing. I was like, oh, this is my thing, because I'm like very business oriented, but I'm also creative. And that together is you get a producer. And producers have to be entrepreneurial, but they also have to understand storytelling and story structure and character development. And so I was like, oh, this is my bread and butter. And so from there, after I moved to Atlanta, and I lived in Atlanta from 2019 to 2021. So for about a year and a half through the pandemic, which was fun. Not really, but it was fun. And from there, that's where Concept Factory was birthed, because I was like, hey, I got to Atlanta, I didn't know a single soul, and I need community. And so I was on Instagram looking up different filmmaker networking events. I was on Eventbrite. I was looking at what the city of Atlanta had to offer. And I was finding different networking things. But I really was just like, hey, what if there was a hub that was permanent, brick and mortar, where people could come together with creatives? What if there were creative groups? What if there was this, and that's how Concept Factory was birthed.
So good, man. It's so good. Yeah. So like I started following you and I was like, man, like this guy is you're inspiring. And I think that you have this ability to really connect people. And I could tell that about you, because I think I'm the same way. Like people always say, man, I literally was at a dinner 2 nights ago with some of my buddies, and they've all like come to the creative meetups.
Yeah.
But they've all come at different times and they never had met each other. And so I was like, I'm just gonna have a guys' night. And we went out to dinner, and the first thing that one of the guys said, he's like, man, like you have the ability just to bring people together. And it's like it's a superpower. A lot of people just don't do it. And I'm like, it just comes natural to me. It's like, why not? And he asked me, he's like, why do you feel like, and to get a little bit deeper, he's like, why do you feel like you're so good at that? And I was like, honestly, I think it probably is rooted a little bit out of fear of being alone. I literally was like, I think that it's something in me, deep within me. It's like, I don't want to be alone. And so I want to grab people, and I know the feeling of being alone, and I know the feeling of maybe being isolated, where it's like, oh, Andrew has so many friends, but nobody's calling me, nobody's texting me, nobody's checking in on me, right? Because I'm the guy that's like, I walk into the room, I'm like, I make people feel good, I make people feel heard, seen, loved, all these different things. But then when I'm going home and laying my head on my pillow, I'm like, where's that person for me? You know what I mean? And so I think God has gifted you and God has gifted me into this idea of what collaboration looks like. Because when you start talking about like hubs and all these different things, bro, like that is right up my alley, because I feel like there's not a good place for it. And especially for young creatives that are coming up that maybe don't have the budget, or they don't have the knowledge, but they really want to learn. So creating a hub, creating a space where they can come in together, they can create, we can all collaborate together is beautiful. But like, I want to ask you this question. In the middle of creating Concept Factory, I know that it was birthed out of this idea of bringing collaboration and bringing people together. Out of that kind of idea, what is the main thing that really keeps you going? And then on the other side of it, how do you maintain collaboration through community? Like, what does that look like on a day-to-day for Concept Factory for you specifically?
I think 2 things really keep me going. For one, it's all supernatural passion that God has deposited inside of me. When God gives you a vision for something, He will always supply you what you need. And a lot of times we think, oh, that means money. That means people. And God's like, yes, I will. He sent me people. He sent me the money that, not all of it yet, but he sent me the money that we need. Yeah. And, he sends us the resources. But what also God has given me is he's given me a grace. And a lot of people are and this is no shade to anybody, but it's so important to make sure that you're partnering with what God told you to do and what God has deposited inside of you, where your giftings and where he's the passion and purpose he's put inside of you.
Yeah.
Because if he did not call you to do it, he is not obligated to give you the grace to fulfill that thing. And so therefore you got a lot of people out here that are trying to do X, Y, and Z. And one day they're in trading, and the next day they're in crypto, and the next day they're in marketing, and then the next day they're this and a that and a that. They call this the day of the day of the slashes of like, oh, I'm a such and such slash such and such slash such and such. And you're like, pick one, or at least pick two. And it's just like with that, everybody's trying to throw stuff to the wall to see what sticks as far as their purpose. And they don't have a grace for it because God's like, hey, you're out here trying to do crypto and work on Wall Street. And you're out here trying to do, life coaching. But what I've called you to be is a teacher. And what I've called you to be is I've called you to work on cars. Or for some people, hey, I've called you to start a business, and you're over here trying to preach. You need to get out the pulpit and you need to go start that business, because that's where I'm going to really use you to preach. And it's like, oh, crap. So with that, because God has called me to do Concept Factory, he's given me the grace. And so what grace looks like is I have a passion. When I come home for work after work, y'all, working at Elevation is no easy thing. Have you seen the church? And so with that, sometimes we can run hard at work, and I can maybe be physically fatigued, but all of a sudden when I get home, or even on my way home, I have this joy because I know that I have 3 hours in my schedule to work on Concept Factory, and I just have energy all of a sudden. Where does that come from? That's a grace. I have a grace for on my days off to hop on meetings and to work on stuff. And I'll have people come to me and be like, man, how did you get all this done? And yes, for one, I have a great team around me, but also it's like God's given us them and myself the grace to be able to know how to do stuff, to be able to have the energy and the passion. So that's one thing that keeps me going. And of course that comes from a strong vision of God has shown me the end goal of he's shown me the finish line. Every athlete, I used to run track, and every athlete, if you're only focusing when you're on a track about the here and the now of where I'm at on this current track, or those who are beside me, you will get distracted. You have to look at that finish line, and you got to push toward that finish line when every muscle in your body is telling you to stop because I'm hurting. You have to press through because you can see that finish line. But the moment that a track athlete starts looking to the left and to the right to see who's running next to them, you're not going to make it. Nobody in track really counts up their laps. All right, this is lap 2. They count down their laps. All right, I have 2 more laps to go, 1 more lap to go. They don't say 1, 2, 3, 4. They count down because they have their mind set on the finish line. And so it's the same thing with the vision that God has given. I'm like, oh, I see our collaboration hubs. Oh, I see hundreds of groups popping up across the country. Oh, I see workshops partnering with the biggest studios and production companies. Oh, I see this stuff. I see people getting jobs in industries that they never would have been able to step into alone, but because they have a community around them and they have training and resources, I see it all, and so that's probably the 2 biggest things. And I think the third thing, and this just came to me, that I've had to practice is because I have a high capacity to work a lot. I'm just a natural worker. So I think for me, it comes just easier. But with that, God has also had to teach me the power of rest and to put stuff down at a certain hour of the day, to put Concept Factory down at the end of the week. So Saturdays are my Sabbath day. And it's all right, on Saturdays, put it down. Don't work on it. And then you can pick it up Sunday after church or Sunday evening. And I partner and I co-labor with God. And that's where the energy comes from, is when I don't abuse the calling and I don't abuse the gift. And in times where I am starting to abuse it, the Lord will quickly check me and be like, hey, you better scale back. And I'm like, and he doesn't do it in a or else way. He does it in a, hey, you better scale back because you're about to hit burnout. If you don't, you need to rest. Even if you feel like you got a lot of work to do for this vision, don't forget that I'm the one supplying you the grace for this vision. You're not the one giving me I'm not giving God the green light. God's like, hey, I own the earth and the universe, and I'm the creator. He's like, no, son, you need to partner with me because I am your source. And the moment that I take my eyes off of God and put my eyes on me, that's where things go crazy.
So good. So what I'm hearing you saying is you're partnering with God. Your first collaboration is one with God.
Absolutely.
Your second collaboration is one with yourself and then your team that is around you. And then it goes beyond that. I think that is so important for creatives to hear that. especially because I've been in that place where I've been through burnt out through local church,
Hmm.
through just driving and going, and a lot of it could be put on me because I don't know how to say no. You know what I mean? And there's like
Hmm.
this push, and there's always this one project, this next project, this so on
Hmm.
and so forth, and keep going and keep pushing and keep pushing the envelope. Like, what can we do bigger and better and more and more and more? So I understand that and I realize that. But what I'm hearing you say is that rest is so important,
Yes.
and your co-collaboration with God is the most important, because that actually allows you to keep going. It allows you to keep moving. It allows you to keep
Right.
pressing in to the things that God has called you to do. And so, dude, I mean, if anybody doesn't get anything else out of that, like, that's
Yeah.
gold. You know what I mean? To listen
Yeah.
to that and to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit and to rest. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of us, we just don't know how to rest. Creatives, like, it's like we don't know how to rest. But what did God do when He created
Yeah.
everything? He rests on what? The seventh day. Like, He
Right.
rested and He took time and He looked at His labor. He looked at what He did, but He rested and took it in so that He could do more. And I
Right.
think a lot of us on the creative world, and that's why a lot of, I think, even creatives are exiting the church, the local church today, is because we don't know how to rest. You know,
Hmm.
Saturday comes along and then your pastor's sending you slides to produce graphics for Sunday. And it's like,
Right.
no, like, that should be done on another day where it's not my
Right.
Sabbath, and saying no
Right.
and creating boundaries for what that looks like. I have a question for you when it comes to um, on your side of Concept Factory and choosing the team that surrounds you,
Hmm.
because I think that this is really important, especially for people that may be starting businesses, even like where I'm in, where I've been, Nomolos Creative has been a business for about a year and a half. I've gone through so many ups and downs. People come, people leaving,
Yeah.
coming in, going out, 7 employees now. So
Yeah.
it's just like, it's crazy. But I think it's
Yeah.
so important that you pick the right team. So how do you
Yeah.
specifically choose the team that has surrounded you?
Yeah, and I love this question because I was just telling my parents not too long ago. I said it's gotten real easy to say no to a lot of people, and I used to because I'm a feeler and because I'm really relational and I'm really, but like, I totally relate when it's like I don't want to be alone, stuff like that. It can be very easy for me to just tell people yes, because the fact that the thought of telling them no now gives a risk of, hey, you may lose this relationship. And in our hearts, it's like, oh, losing a relationship is seen as like major, like, no, like, don't do that. Like, whatever you do, don't feel pain and don't lose a relationship because it causes too much pain, because of pain of rejection, and it just gets all in your head. So with that, with the team for Concept Factory, and I got to give God credit through Him having me at Elevation Church, because I've learned a lot through them. It's not a perfect place. There is no perfect church. There is no perfect
Right.
workplace. If you find one, please let me know if y'all are hiring, because
Right.
I've yet to hear or work for one that's a perfect workplace. But with that, it's such a great organization because they've really worked through the kinks of, hey, make the hiring process really vetted. I think sometimes they may vet people too much, but with that, they really are big on, hey, who's playing on your team? And my current supervisor I work under, his name's Andrew. He does a fantastic job. He's just one of the best leaders I've ever worked under. And he just does a great job with, for one, making sure that before he makes a decision on a person, he makes sure that the current team, all is compatible with that person. So he actually has them go through the interview first with the team before he actually sits down. And so it's just really a beautiful model. And we began doing that with Concept Factory. Is when I find, because we're right now all volunteer staff, and so you got all these people, they work full-time jobs or in school, and then on their spare time they come and work for Concept Factory. And with that, one thing that I had to do was, practically, I had to make sure that they had a clear job description. Everybody gets a job description. I don't care if you are a blog writer or whether you are a director of operations, whatever, you get a job description, because clarity is king. The
Wow.
second thing is everybody has a touch point with, we have a girl, her name's Paris. She's over talent and culture, which is like our fancy way of saying HR and and talent acquisition. So she handles that. Everybody has a first interview with her, but then they have their second interview with me, the founder. The reason I believe that's important is because the founder is going to have the vision the strongest. Your team will be able to communicate that vision. They'll be fired up about it, but ain't nobody going to tell it like the original, like the one who got it first. Same way you can have, it's almost like hearing something about, about God from a person. It can be great. God can totally speak through a person. But what better way to learn about God than to talk to God himself? He is the original. So it's like, that's why it's so important of like, hey, listening to sermons and stuff are great, but you got to get into your word and you got to get into the Bible. You got to read it for yourself to hear God speak with his words. And so that's why it's so important. So with that, I make sure that everybody has a touch base with myself, even during their first week of training. We call it Academy Week or CF Academy for Concept Factory Academy. And that's a week-long training. And one of their first session is with me. Because I want them to be able to come onto the team to know like, hey, this is not just a founder who we'll get an email from and we don't know and we're afraid to open it because we think we're going to get fired. I want them to get a text or an email from me, or if they see a voice memo pop up on their phone, they're excited to open it. It's like, that's the type of culture we're trying to create. So one thing that I do, that's pretty much how we create like a culture for the team. Now, as far as having a good team, I make sure that I ask the tough questions up front, and I make sure that I'm really honest with people, saying, hey, guess what? Concept Factory is going to require at least 10 hours of your week on top of your work life, your personal life. Some people on our team are in relationships or they're married or whatever it may be. Some of them have kids. And it's like, hey, you're going to be required a lot. I make sure that we really communicate the vision, because if you don't know where we're going and if you don't get it, you're going to burn out as soon as you get an email from me at 9 o'clock at night for the next morning for you to open. I make sure I communicate that. And then compatibility with the current team is really important. And I also make sure that I tell everybody up front, hey, you don't have to be a Christian to work here, but guess what? We open our prayers with, we open our meetings with prayer. We are a Christian faith-based organization, meaning that you won't hear about Jesus in this thing because he's all in. And so letting people know up front, hey, I'm not asking you right now to believe the same way I do, but I am asking you to respect it and to give you let you know up front before I don't want to trick you into this thing. I want to let you know up front that, hey, this will be a thing that is happening here. If you choose to participate in our prayers or not, that's up to you. You have that liberty, but guess what? We gonna pray. And so with that, people appreciate honesty because they're like, hey, not only am I getting it from the founder, I can trust him because he's being honest with me, but I'm also clear on what it is I'll be doing. Clarity is king. And so those are some of the ways that we find people. And unfortunately, some people on our team, because it's a volunteer role, some people unfortunately won't last long just because seasons change. We've had great teammates they'll come to me and say, hey, Alan, like I just got a new job, or I'm going back to school, or hey, I just had I'm expecting a kid, or whatever it may be. And hey, Alan, I just can't commit. And I totally understand. And, we wish them goodbye and everything. And then there's been other people where I've had to, unfortunately, have the tough conversation and ask them to leave just because, and people say, well, how do you fire a volunteer? You do it by letting them know, can we have a Zoom call? And then you tell them they have to go. But with that, one thing that we do is we make sure that nobody gets, I don't want to use the word fired, but nobody gets exited from Concept Factory without knowing well in advance that there's some blood in the water. Because with that, I don't think anybody, unless they do something right out just crazy, nobody should just like randomly get an email from me saying, hey, thank you for serving, but this will be your last day. That's just tacky and it's really weird. Before a person gets let go, they're going to have at least 2 or 3 touch points of, hey, these are some things we're noticing. Hey, there's been a huge lack of communication, or hey, there's been a lack of execution. Hey, you said that you're going to be here at this meeting and you just haven't shown up for 3 meetings. This is an issue. And then after a while, we've had one team member where the individual had kind of just went MIA for a while. And we had to unfortunately send them an email and say, we've assumed job abandonment at this point. And then they respond, oh, so sorry, we've been busy. And at that point, I remember with this individual, it had been several touch points of communication and trying to help them. And we put, systems and structures in place for them to be able to come to me. And I have an open door policy of like, you can reach out to me anytime. And then from there, after that, it's just had to be, hey, you have to go. Because the one thing that I've realized is what you allow in the beginning, it will only intensify in the end. A lot of people think, what's the old saying? How you practice is how you play. If you think you're going to go into a football game and you're in football practice and you think you're just going to kind of just cut corners, oh, I'm not going to really run the ball, I'm going to kind of just like not really do anything, but on the game day, I'm going to come and I'm going to show up and I'm going to do this, and you think you're going to look like an NFL star out there. Well, guess what? Nope. You won't. Yep. Because how you practice is how you play. And the same thing applies for businesses. If I allow the little foxes to get in now, if I allow a little, slacking here, slacking there, and I'm not saying be so rigid with people that you don't have grace. That's not the same. Some people are just, they have to catch up quicker than others. or it takes a little longer for them than others to kind of get the system and flow and meetings and stuff like that. But I just have to unfortunately let people know, here are the standards here. Everybody has to be held to the same standards. The reason the standard is high is because we want to go far. And if the standard is low, you can't expect for people to respect you. And we've heard many times and times again that people will say, oh, Concept Factory is very professional. And it's like, absolutely. And if people don't reach that bar, we unfortunately have to ask them, hey, this is just not the organization for you.
Yeah, man, that's so good. So just kind of having a deeper vetting process in the beginning, so that way in the end and in the middle, you've already vetted out everything in the beginning.
Yeah.
You've already been clear. You've set the tone, you've set the vision, you've set the expectations, and so now they can actually run with those expectations. So now let's go a little bit deeper and talking. You have the team, you have the core team, right? And then you're working on a project together, but somebody disagrees with an outcome of a certain thing or a certain film or the way that was produced or a certain shot. How do you, as the founder, the CEO of Concept Factory, when you're looking, because like I'm a guy that I love to observe. I love to observe how like people within my team communicate. Because it gives me a clearer picture of how I can confront certain situations. So I'll like sit back for like, they can be in a conversation for a project for like, say it's like graphic design or a branding project we're working on, and they're going back and forth. And I'm just watching it, and I'm watching how they're communicating, because I actually love it, because I find value in it, because then I can actually call things out. What type of like, what do you do in moments of conflict when it comes to your team building something or doing a project together? How do you handle that?
I think establishing and overly communicating from the start that everybody has a voice. And I make sure I tell everybody on the team, even especially when they're newer, because people come in with this concept of, no pun intended, but they come in with this concept of thought of like, oh, I can't disagree with the founder. If the founder says it, then it must be the direction we're going in. And I let them know from the start, guys, if you don't agree with something that I've done, please let me know beforehand. And guess what? Like, I don't know everything. There's going to be things that make sense in my head, and it ain't the way that we should go. Like, and thankfully, it's now created a culture where people, even on the meeting, will say, hey, Alan, I actually want to offer, like, I don't know if that's the best idea of how we should execute that. Or, hey, have you thought about this? That's a good idea, but I don't know if we should pull the trigger on that right now. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. And there's been many a times where 99% of the time, and sometimes it's like, I'll say like, well, this is my reasoning for it. And they'll say, okay, now I get it. So now I do think that, I do agree. But then a lot of times it's like 99% of it is like me saying, oh my God, I didn't think about that. Thank you so much for saying something. But if they had failed to disagree with me publicly, and do it in a respectful way, of course, there's a respectful way to disagree. Concept Factory would hurt, because if everything is coming through me and being filtered by my thought process, I'm gonna miss something somewhere along the lines. And so if it's not, and so I actually encourage people to disagree, not in like a dissension type of way, but I encourage people to offer their feedback and say, hey, you have a voice as well. And there's honestly, and this is funny to laugh at, but there's been ideas offered before in my head. I'm thinking like, ooh, that's a bad idea. Or like, nah, that idea just ain't good. But I'm not going to say that, because, I can, but the beautiful thing is even if a person offers their idea and I say, hey, that's a great idea, but we won't be able to execute it at this time, or, hey, we're not going to go in that direction, they still feel respected, that it was heard, it was considered, and it was actually thought through. Because nothing hurts worse than being in a meeting and somebody says, hey, offer your idea, and you finally get a little bit of courage to speak up, and somebody shuts it down. Bam! That will do more damage to a person's dignity and just like courage than if their idea wasn't gone with. I've been, unfortunately, in meetings before where I've worked on creative teams at jobs and stuff, and I've spoken up and been like, well, hey, this is what I think we should, this is my opinion, or this is where I think we should go, or hey, I don't think that where we're going is a good idea, and bam, it's shut down. And even if people don't realize, like, they may not have had any ill intent toward it, but you can tell, not only when an idea is shut down quickly, does that hurt, but it's also when people make you feel like your idea is stupid, or they're like, oh, no, like that, no, almost like that was just, why you wasted oxygen on that one. Moving on. If you do that with people, And then you're sitting there on a meeting, and then founders and team leaders find themselves scratching their heads saying, "Okay, guys, how come nobody will speak up?" Well, what culture are you creating? So with that,
Wow.
I think like healthy conflict, healthy disagreement should be encouraged in organizations. And that's one thing that we do for our team. And it's now got to the point where when people do disagree, it's also like not a big deal. And another thing I'll
Yeah.
say is with that is going back to where I spoke about the individual and the team who had to ask to be let go. One thing that we value at Concept Factory is transparency. The moment that people begin to see me as the founder as if I'm hiding stuff from them creates a level of speculation of I can't fully trust you because I don't know what you're telling me and what you're not telling me. And granted, some things that team members share with me or that we'll talk with one-on-one, I won't bring up in meetings because that's between me and that person. Or I'm not
Right.
going to get on the meeting and air out everybody's dirty laundry of like, hey guys, this is what's going on with one of your team members. We're not going to say who, but somebody on the team is going through such and such. No, there's some stuff that does not need to be talked about. But then in other cases, I came to the team just a few weeks ago and I said, hey guys, the person's name on our team who was in this role, they were asked to step down. They did not quit. I asked them to step down because of these reasons. And I say, guys, like, I just want you to know that the reason I'm telling you this is because we value transparency. But here's the kicker, and I believe the Holy Spirit put this on my heart when I was having that conversation with them. The Lord was like, tell them if, and when I say like the Lord spoke to me, I'm not saying that God like speaks to me with a megaphone in my ear. These are just impressions in my spirit that come like in real time. And, so I don't want anybody to hear this and be like, well, I don't hear God. Oh no, you hear God. And it's usually through
Mm-hmm.
that inner gut feeling. And so with that real moment, the Lord was like, tell them if they do not agree with you letting that person go, they can come to you. And so I said it right there on the phone and I was like, hey guys, I was like, this was a decision that was made. I was like, it was over the series of couple months that we had to talk with this person and we had meetings with them and we gave them systems and processes in place to improve, but they failed to improve. And so therefore we asked them to go to step down. I said, but if you feel that you don't agree with me on this decision or you would like more clarity, you can come to me one-on-one and I would love to hear you out. And
Mm.
somebody on that call, on that same Zoom call, they said, Alan, we really just appreciate that you're approachable and that you're willing to almost like have that conversation because nobody wants a leader where the leader's like, this is the way it goes. La, 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 la. I don't want to hear anything else. Just move on. Just do your work. Who wants to follow a leader like that? Like,
Right.
and you want to go to a leader where you say, hey, even if I disagree, I know that I can go into their presence, into their office
Yep.
or to their Zoom
Yep.
call, and I can have their ear and they will hear me out because they care about me. And that speaks
Mm.
so much further than anything.
That's so good, man. So like basically creating a culture of authenticity, vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
openness, space where anybody can come in any moment, any of the day, and you just being transparent with them. Because I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that transparency actually builds trust. I'm a
Yes.
firm believer. I'm a firm believer in that. Even just in general, when you're talking to an employee or talking to a volunteer on a church level, I think that oftentimes we have creatives just follow, but there's no really
Mm-hmm.
clear direction and there's no open door for them to communicate and to
Mm-hmm.
have a conversation. So yeah, I dude, like I'm fully I think the biggest thing for me, and even in this conversation, that's been like I'm just been taking it in and listening. I'm like, oh man, like even as a leader, for myself, it's really good because I think sometimes we get to the point where there's so many decisions on a high end, especially as a founder, CEO, that we're
Mm-hmm.
always thinking like the big picture. We're always thinking, especially for me,
Mm-hmm.
like I have salaries to pay. I have people that are like, and I'm thinking like, if this project is not done at this point in
Yeah.
time, there's this, and this is happening afterwards, and you know what I mean. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I get to that point, I'm like, oh, and I drive, but then I have to slow down, and so it's really good that you're one reminded me to rest and slow down, but then also
Mm-hmm.
to be clear in communication and be like, hey, this is the reason why I was so passionate about getting this one project done,
Mm-hmm.
just so that you can see and just so you can know on the back end why I was this way. And I think
Mm-hmm.
understanding the why behind everything that we do and clearly communicating the why is
Yes.
so important. It's
Yes.
so important. So my final question and is for you would be, how do you maintain the vision that God gives you even in the middle of team that may not understand it completely, because you
Oh
can
yeah.
explain it all day long, right? I can like, this is the vision. This is it. Like I was in a real time
Yeah.
conversation with one of my interns here, and she's amazing and awesome. But I was like, this is the vision for creative meetups. I gave her, like, literally laid it all out, this massive thing. And she's like, okay, cool. Like, I was like, do you got it? You know, you understand it? And then a couple weeks later, she's like, I really don't understand it. And so I had to go back. So how do you, I'm like, it's easy. It's simple. I'm like, it's there. It's like this vision, like execute A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Like, it's right there. Like, line it up. Like, also I want you to do is just make the pieces come together. You know what I mean? But how do you maintain, and how do you, I guess my question is, how do you maintain the vision when maybe everybody else that might be underneath you, they understand a glimpse of it, but they don't understand the full picture of it? How do you deal with that within the organization?
Yeah, it shows us in scripture. God gave us the recipe for it. He says in Habakkuk 2, chapter 2, verse 2 and 3, he says, make the vision plain so that those who read it may run with it. And so, therefore, God is showing us right there, if I have a duty as the founder of the one that God gave the vision to first, because God is going to also give the vision through other people, but he's going to give it to them through my mouthpiece, because he spoke it to me first. And so therefore, God is saying, I have a responsibility to make that thing so clear, to write it down. And it says, write the vision and make it plain. So God has given us two very key steps: write it and make it plain, so that it can produce clarity. And that's what God is saying in the scripture. And so with that, I had to really write the vision down. And it started out as me like jotting it down in notebooks and long sheets of paper, where I'm like typing out paragraphs of like, this is what concept factor is going to be. And then I rework it, and then I rework it, and then I rework it to get it down to a vision statement, or I'll get it down to just a simple paragraph, and then I'll put it up on the website. And like, you know, and one thing that I do to make people really help them get it, and I'm still sometimes learning because everybody's different. Some people in our team during the interview, they'll be like, oh my God, I got it. Like, this is going to be amazing. And then other people, I'm like, do you really get it? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, yeah. So with that, one thing that I had to do is realize that I had to realize that I needed a person to regurgitate the vision back to me. And it'll be a conversation of, what does this vision statement mean to you? And a person will be like, oh, it means... And usually when they have to speak it out, and you ask them, what do you think about this project? Can you explain the project to me that I just explained to you? Can you? And one thing that we do during CF Academy is we'll say, hey, you have your job description. At that point, they've had their job description for over a week. And we'll say, explain your role to me, as if you're the interviewer and I'm the interviewee. Explain your role to me. And they'll say, well, my role is to do this, this, and this, this, and this. And my responsibilities are this, this, and this, and this. And I'll say, there you go. Explain the vision to me. Oh, okay. Well, I'll say, like, well, what does it mean to you personally? If you were on the outside looking in, what does it mean to you? And they'll say, well, I feel that Concept Factory is going to do blah, 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 blah. Or I feel like our mission is to reach these type of people. And if they're totally misguided, or what they tell me is like, that ain't it, I now, as the founder, have to help them correct that and say, well, actually, this is where we're going. But 9 times out of 10, people will say, no, this is what we're about. And this is what. And so when you can get that from them out of their own mouth, you know, because remember, the Bible says out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. It didn't say in certain situations, it just says the mouth speaks out of the abundance of the heart. So when a person is communicating something to you out of their mouth, it's a very good indication of, hey, this is in their heart. You can understand this thing. And so yeah.
So good, man. Well, thank you so much for just taking your time today just to join me. And dude, I am fully on board with what you guys are doing. I love what you guys are doing. I pray for you guys constantly. So I hope that you guys are being pushed forward. So thank you so much for joining me. If you guys want to follow Alan, go ahead and follow him on socials. Concept Factory. Is it conceptfactory.us? The website? .us. Okay, that's what I thought. So go ahead and give him a follow. But yeah, dude, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you and your ability to pursue, no matter what, to stay on board with the vision of what God has called you to do. So keep going, man. Keep chasing, because God has great plans for you, dude.
Thank you. Likewise for y'all too. I can't wait to visit. I've never been to Utah, but I'll be there.
Come on. All right. We're going to talk about creative meetups soon. It's been on my radar. So, all right, man. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.